Here we are, another group meeting or discussion Sunday morning, April 7th. And I've got Gabe and JP here so far. I expect Anthony will be here, maybe Jenna, some other stragglers. And Gabe, you were just beginning to tell me about the week, and some of it I'm aware of because of our conversations. But maybe you could illuminate everyone as we sort of start to focus in on the obsession and the addiction to this idea we have that thinking is our reality and as a result becomes who we are.
Yeah, those words exactly is some professional and business things have come across this week that sent me back to panic and fear, which has been a long time since I've had a real panic attack. And they came about this week and we talked about them, and Jack, you've been really helpful and gracious with your time and words. And I've been talking with others about this too in the program, but I think it really these are like the drink. All of these stories and occasions and trifles are symptoms of a larger disease. And this is the disease I'm facing. And I think you and I spoke about sort of incomprehensible demoralization and that I'm sick. And seeing in the mirror what's clearly reflected as being sick is depressing, is sad, is sort of demoralizing, like you said, because it's immoral. And that's really just where I'm at right now. It's hard to see this and sort of hard to witness, but at least I'm witnessing the dis-ease sort of in the mirror.
Right.
And that's hard to sit with, Jack. I know we talked about sitting with it and looking at it and being with it, but man, it's hard. And you do just want to feel better, and you want to check that box off that issue is okay, and check that box that issue is okay, and then I can get on with my life, but I'm just covering up the disease, the mental illness.
So, well,
I'm in the right place, you guys.
There's really no cover for something that doesn't go away the longer we maintain it. And the idea that, one of the things we talked about this week, Gabe, is that the circumstances seem to be the triggers, but the source of the problem is always far exceeds the actual problem, the thing we think is the problem, the trigger.
Yeah.
The idea that the circumstances are like this pinprick that have us notice the gravity, literally, of the weight we've created in making believe who we are is what we think. And you're even saying, I am sick. You are not necessarily sick. Maybe you are, but I would suggest your thinking is sick. And when our thinking gets sick and we think that's our reality, our bodies tend to follow that because it depresses them, undermines our immune system and our neurosympathetic or our parasympathetic nervous systems. All of those, the neurological synapses become distressed in their ability to depressed and distressed in their ability to actually sense what's happening accurately enough, because they're being fed information that has nothing to do with reality. It's literally coming out of this thinking we're doing. It isn't reality, it's just presumed reality because it seems so consuming. Our experience seems to have us in it. And when you're in it, as you're describing, it's very uncomfortable to sit with it because it doesn't seem like it will ever go away and could ever be anything other than what it is. And yet we are the makers of that. We are the deniers of that. We are the ones that let it grow to the proportions that it seems to overtake us by not, in the moment, being honest about what's happening right now.
No, not only letting the fire burn, Jack, adding gasoline.
Yes.
While pretending, not to.
Right. If you're going to do it, you're going to do it well.
Yeah, not to be, oh, I missed that. Oh, I was busy with this other thing. No, I'm going to the store with empty bottles of to fill with gasoline. Like I'm purposefully putting my head in the sand or not addressing what's clearly there to be addressed.
So one of the things we talked about, and I will make mention of again, first of all, is giving credit where credit is due, because generally speaking, when we're lying, we're taking credit for what isn't happening as being creditworthy, and we're discounting credit for what's actually happening as being uncreditworthy. So that's the immoral twist of this thinking, that my reality all of a sudden means there is no other reality. And if there is another reality and I'm denying it, then I'm actually thinking I can conquer that other reality that is completely pervasive as a reality compared to the one I'm simply creating in my own thinking. And that's a major conflict. But as we talked about this past week, Gabe, credit where credit is due, if you're starting to see it, and also see it in all its implications and manifestations and ramifications, that's a result of your willingness to start looking at it accurately and honestly, rather than a willingness to continue to deny it and misrepresent it and pretend it isn't what it is and have it continue to grow until you once again get overwhelmed and can't take it anymore and have created a circumstance to finally justify looking at it so clearly. And I would suggest if you look at your circumstances, they're pretty minor compared to the feeling you're having as a result.
No, they're non-existent, really.
Yes. So, but look at the excuse we use at first. That's what sets it off. And we think it's the problem, the circumstance. We're going to give away all of our culpability to some circumstances that happen that we didn't expect or might not want, and then forego the benefit of saying, wow, this thing is triggering the totality of all of this thinking that's going on in me. It's not triggering one thought against one circumstance. It's triggering the entire basis of that thinking in my experience. And if you begin to give credit where credit's due, it's pretty marvelous that we have this mechanism that allows us to see the totality of it rather than dwell on the idea that the circumstance, if I fix it, is going to make me better, while in doing that, I'm denying the totality of what's actually wrong. If those circumstances are wrong and I was healthy, I would look at them, determine what need be done about them, and correct them. I'd adjust. I would immediately know what to do. There's simple solutions. When I see them as this totality and responsible for it, now I'm in an impossible situation because I'm simply mistaking what I have for what it isn't, what I think it is. And that sets off this whole cavalcade of ideas and thoughts of hopelessness, et cetera. But it isn't incorrect that we're hopeless. It's actually correct that the hopelessness is simply telling us what we're doing is hopeless. But again, in that twisted mental bend, we're seeing that as something to escape from, to feel better than, rather than say, wow, this is actually giving me the accurate information about a hopeless condition, because I'm not going to get better continuing to do the thing that's causing the problem. And I think in that same vein, Gabe, as we started talking about that and saying, look at this, is actually giving you a chance to look at the totality of those issues at the root, rather than, if we had to figure out every wrong thought we had, we'd be hopeless, because there's no way to do that, because we keep recreating new thoughts that are wrong, rather than look at the base wrong. Just like if somebody doesn't understand 2 + 2 is 4 and is now doing higher calculus and trigonometry and whatever else might come and mathematically, and they're still basing it on that 2 + 2 is 6, they're always going to have faulty conclusions, no matter how elevated and how well they are in all those other areas. And this basic root is, we think our thoughts are reality. They are not reality. They are imagined. They are considerations. They are contemplations. They are assessing, analyzing. They're part of a mental process that's attempting to determine things to help us survive, not to kill us and undermine what we're doing. So the other aspect of that is, as this clarity sets in, as you allow it, as you notice it, as you concede it for what it is, give credit where credit's due, and saying, wow, I have a full view of what's happening. I can take credit for that. I can take credit for this feeling that's so uncomfortable. And that's the beginning of embracing it and having it and saying, wow, if it's happening and I'm simply witnessing that it's happening, there's no incongruity there. There's no malignment in that. It's just allowing what's happening to happen. And as a result, I'm feeling everything I'm feeling and is actually the curriculum of everything that I need to know about what's happening, because it's everything there is to know about what's happening, because it's happening here in the present, which is where everything happens. So if the greatness of that problem seems so huge, and yet I'm witnessing it, I'm starting to admit I'm capable of observing, and I may have always observed. And I would suggest we always observe what's happening. We always know what's going on. We just don't allow our thinking to always think we know, because we've been struggling with this introduction of this being nature, this spiritual nature, this absolute state of being that we are all connected to. If nature is nature, that must be our nature. And we haven't been good at introducing it to our thinking process, because the primary source of knowledge would be that nature, not what I think about it. So to start to have that clarity, to see it that way, is also to start to see there is a lot of sadness in the world. There are a lot of things to be upset about in the world, as far as I'm concerned. The book says it. 12 and 12 says it. There's sorely, in a world that's sorely mistaken, or something, I think he puts it. He's talking about the just starting to look at the world accurately and starting to see there's a lot of pain and hurt out there to be upset over. I don't have to be completely depressed and suicidal over it. I get suicidal over the idea that I shouldn't be feeling what I'm feeling, because I shouldn't be thinking what I'm thinking. And more than that, to your point earlier, you're pouring gas on it. I pour the gas on it by thinking I'm not even thinking what I'm thinking. Not only should I not be thinking what I'm thinking in my thought, which is just a judgment about what I shouldn't be doing while I'm doing it, I go even further to say I'm not even doing it. And that's the gasoline. I have nothing to do with it. That is a suicidal ideation of non-existence. I don't have anything to do with anything. How would that be possible if I have everything to do with everything in relation to the body I have, in relation to the world I'm in relation to the universe we share? Couldn't be. So that may sound huge, but it's no bigger than the universe to talk about the universe, whatever it is. And we're part of it. So to give credit where credit's due is to also see that the actual thing we're struggling with is very, very small compared to the totality of everything. But as we talked about, Gabe, when it's the lens of my understanding as being my reality, I'm looking through this thing that's already faulty, and the world and the universe looks the same. It looks to be the blame. It looks to be the thing that's the source of the fault, when in fact it's a default position I'm taking, because that's the addictive state. I can only do the one thing that's the absolute wrong thing over and over and over and over again. And I can put new faces on it, but it's the same pig, per se. I hate to use pigs for that, but it's a term that's used because we tend to blame animals, hogwash, horse shit, all that kind of stuff, for the stuff we're doing that doesn't add up.
Okay. Done and done.
So the understanding is useless until it's applied. If we're thinking the thinking's going to solve it within our head and it's over, we're really thinking the thinking is in fact in place, and that other essence has never begun, which can't be true. If the essence is essential, it's all we've ever had. And we've been delusional thinking what we're thinking. We've been consumed and intoxicated. We've been intoxicated with our thinking to the point that we felt we were consumed, our attention was consumed, and we had nothing else to do, nothing else to think, but to continue to do the same wrong thing over and over again. So the application of this is just starting to wear it, sit with it like you're doing.
It's frickin' uncomfortable, Joe.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I will suggest to you that all of the anxieties you've had and the insecurities and the doubts and the uncertainties, and also the manifestation of these little problems in your life for decades, have also been uncomfortable. But this idea we're trying to feel better all the time has mapped out a whole way of pretending we're managing those things rather than starting to say, wait a minute, what am I managing all the time that I'm always trying to feel better? It must be something worse. There must be something bad and wrong about what I'm doing in the most fundamental aspect of my life if I'm constantly trying to manage it to feel better, to get over it, to get through it. I want to get through it and past it. I want to leave it behind. When in fact, in mental problems, getting away with it is actually taking it with us because we get away with it, not away from it. It's always going to go where we are because it is caused by the brain we're using or misusing in the terms we insist that our thoughts perform, that they live up to this reality that we ask them to be. They can't. They have their own reality by virtue of what they're designed to do. And if we ask them to then become all of reality, now we're asking them to do what's impossible, what they can't do. Now the performance that they're designed to do within the nature of reality is now being completely upturned and upended. It's not actually, but within the context of thinking, it seems to be because we begin to be reliant on this sort of conflicted, maligned, immoral, incomprehensible, demoralized way of living. And all we're doing is experiencing the disruption of our own choice to continue to rely on thinking as being the only dependable source in the universe. Now, if there was no other source, that would simply be the case. And I would suggest if it was the case, we wouldn't be struggling. We'd say, well, this is just how it is. That's it. We'd be perfectly fine with it because there would be nothing else we literally could do. It's like, yeah, this is how life is, period. That's peace. I'm at ease. I'm aligned. It's healthy, natural. We don't feel that. We don't think that. And I would say it's a suggestion that we're clearly aware there's something better, there's something more, there's something able, real, compared to this fantasy, wishful thinking routine. You had a thought, Kate.
Yeah, but then I got distracted here by family. It's not that you're asking a flat earther to believe in a round earth. It's like it's that kind of shift in understanding.
Good. Yes. It's been done so long, it's taken for granted to be reality because everybody does it. And if we're using everyone else as an excuse, isn't it interesting that we would eliminate our own participation in that excuse by claiming we have nothing to do with it? That we're victims of it? Think of that. Everybody else is doing it. How am I going to stop? We use them as an excuse to do what we continue to choose. And that's the part I'm talking about in terms of application. Nobody gets sober because somebody tells them to. And if somebody tells them to, it's what they do with that thought that has them to make a decision that they need help and they have a problem. It isn't what the person said, ultimately. It can be the lead, the trigger, it can be a part of it, but it isn't that decision that is made. Each of us, if we are free to think, are free to feel whatever we're thinking and feel condemned by the thinking we're doing. We're absolutely free. And people ask, how is that loving? If this love, this source we have, which is mentioned multiple times in the traditions and throughout the book, if this source is love, why would it have us do that? And the answer would be, why would it condemn us only to doing the right thing? What would the right thing be if we were condemned to only do it? There would be no choice. There would be no option. We would just be automatons. We wouldn't have the freedom to grow and learn and be on an adventure and exploration. We'd simply be stuck like an animal in a routine that is basically looking for food and to avoid getting eaten. So we're thwarting our own capacity, the gift of the expanded awareness that we have and capacity to actually function on a basis that benefits all others by making believe somehow or another we are the exceptions in the universe and have nothing to do with nature and have no basis in nature, and that nature is something for nature to be for us to be proud of and wowed by, but it certainly doesn't happen to be our nature either. Or in addition, which is crazy to think that we could be exceptions to that. Well, we're built on the absolute platform that all other life forms exist on and all other inanimate objects function within. Now we're free to think it. It doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean it's aligned. It doesn't mean it's true. It just means we're deciding it's reliable enough because we think it's true. We think we're the creators of reality at that. That's the whole concept of self-centered thinking, when in fact, even self-centered thinking isn't self-centered, it's thinking-centered thinking. We've come to believe that thinking about itself becomes who we are. And we constantly talk. I heard somebody say last night, oh, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Coming from our discussion, that's a funny thing to hear somebody say, that they could possibly ever get ahead of themselves. As though their head isn't going with them where they go, and somehow or another their feet are somewhere else. Whatever that means. When it comes down to the idea that we're not the self we think we are, but constantly refer to this self as though it's something distinct from us, that we talk about as though it is something other than us, rather than speaking from, I need more self-confidence, rather than I'd rather have more confidence. And what I've learned is that courage is basically not doing discouraging things. It naturally comes. It's part of our ability to explore and expand and investigate. But when I'm discouraged, I don't think any of those things are possible. I think courage is some strange thing that some people have that do extraordinary feats, rather than just see it's the simple choice of exactly what we're talking about. To begin to notice that my application of this is the actual responsibility I have for the decisions I'm making that's causing the impression that I don't have anything to do about it. And as a result, can't do anything about it, like sitting still and sitting with that, what seems enormous. But as I begin to admit that it's absolutely what I've caused, absolutely what I'm responsible for, absolutely being caused by the thinking I'm doing and nothing more than that, it begins to dissipate. If I can be honest at all about anything, it takes the sting out of the job I think I have to maintain it and fight it and manage it and suffer from it. It goes, because there isn't anything there. So if there's conflict, it's coming from conflicted thinking. Doesn't mean there aren't things out there in the world that can be conflicted, but it's what we think about them that causes them to become greater or lesser conflicts. What are some of the other suggestions you've heard, Gabe? I know what they are. I just want to hear you say them.
Oh, I don't know. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
So here, let's just stop there. So you're worried and you're being told not to worry. It's exactly what we do in our thinking. I'm thinking something and thinking I shouldn't be thinking that thing. There's the center of this idea that what's happening isn't really happening, that we're not in the present, we're somewhere else. Reality isn't here, it's somewhere else. We've got to go find it and seek it. That's all based on this idea that we're creating our own reality. The consequences of it is immediately thinking that we have no reality. We don't belong to reality, so we feel like we don't belong. We feel disconnected. It isn't us that's disconnected, it's the thought that's disconnected because it has no denominator, no substance. Reality is, if reality is reality, then the substance of these life forms we have is the essential component of this seeming reality, right? The blood, the oxygen, the chemicals, all of the stuff that's going on anatomically and physiologically that we don't see. And when we see it, something's seriously wrong. We're either in surgery or we've been hit by a car and our brain is all over the street. And yet we take for granted that if we don't see things, they're not happening. When in fact, we know even in our body, most of what's happening, we never see. Like our eyes never see themselves. And we don't tend to put this together with our own thinking that we're doing about thinking we shouldn't be thinking what we're thinking while we're thinking what we're thinking. Think of how complex that becomes and how quickly that becomes an irritant in almost every respect to anything we relate to, is thinking that it's up to us to decide that we're doing what we're doing rather than, or that we're not doing what we're doing, rather than simply concede that we're doing what we're doing is pretty assured. And whether we want to continue is the question. If there's any doubt in it, it's about what's next. It's about what we're going to choose. And if the basis of my choosing is already disturbed and ailing, I'm going to continue to choose sick thinking because I'm going to think that's a solid basis to choose from, which is irresponsible.
But that's exactly what I'm afraid of, being irresponsible.
Exactly. You know why?
Why?
Because there's no fear in it. And it will actually be the full admission that you've been at the center of these choices the whole time. Not you. Your choices have been at the center of this problem the whole time. We're so afraid. The fear is being created by being afraid of the fear. So it's a chain reaction of reacting to reacting. It's literally what the obsession is. There is no fear in an absolute state of being. There is no fear in knowing in an absolute state. There is no fear in any reality. And when you experience the kind of fear that's actually dealing with a threat, the experience is drastically different than the one we feel when we're feeling this imposed threat, this induced threat, this insane threat, because the fear in that case is actually giving us perfect knowledge and direction as to what to do. Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn are all basic instincts to deal with a threat. And those would help us survive rather than be the thing that's killing us. Again, the disease can be seen as a disease because as we do the things we think are natural, because they're unnatural, everything's turned around. Instincts now are killing us. They're not helping us. And instincts aren't obsessive thinking, except to the obsessive thinker thinking they're instincts. We put the hat on everything backward, or we put the brain on everything backward. So the fear is actually telling, it's like a bully game. The whole process is set up to give you the impression that if something's fearful that we're creating, the impression is if we face it, we're going to face more fear. Rather than actually facing it and realizing I'm creating it, that's pretty crazy to continue to do that and then be afraid of the thing I've created as though I have no control over it. Think of how quickly we have to think that we have nothing to do with it to have that be the case. While we're at the center of the decision and the choice. And where's the choice being made? Here, now, right now. Come to terms with that is to start actually noticing, saying, wow, if it can even be possible, then the word might becomes mighty in that possibility. It might be, maybe I am doing this. You don't have to agree with it, believe in it. Truth needs no belief whatsoever to be true. Thinking thought is reality is a belief that's core, which JP and I kind of go around at times, but my sense is the point he's making, or coming close to making, or the point I've been trying to make, is that when I think thoughts are reality and they're not reality, if I just thought thoughts were thoughts, there's no belief in that. They're just thoughts. I'm just having them as they are. As soon as I think they're reality, that's a belief. At the core of my existence, I believe that my thoughts are reality. Now the belief becomes a contaminant because reality doesn't need belief. Reality has been reality since before belief and thinking ever was started in terms of our species, humans. There were no brains here thinking about reality when reality at the beginning of the universe or whatever preceded that. And I'm speaking in the broadest sense. I'm not speaking about history. I'm not speaking about circumstances. I'm speaking about the essence of essence. And to overlook that as though, oh, well, that's too ethereal, that's too esoteric. Those are just big words to think about. It's actually discounting and denying the actual state of our ready, present, and able being right now. It doesn't actually do that, but to delusional thinking it does, and so too then to the dysfunctional actions we take because of the basis of the thinking being insane. What are we going to do but do things that don't make any sense? And for sentient beings to make nonsense is a very disturbing consequence. We're aware of it because we feel it. And the feelings we have, if they're given accurate, which we talked about this past week, if you begin to notice the words you use and the feelings and begin to consider that they're actually accurate for what's happening, rather than things to tell you to run from and escape through and feel better than, it starts to diffuse it right away. And my sense is, Gabe, too, since you're so used to giving credit where credit's due, you've probably been doing this while not noticing it because you've been noticing the other aspects of it that are much more aligned with the sickness you're trying to overcome, thinking that more focus on them is going to help, rather than, again, denying the growth that you're actually doing.
Yeah, I don't see it as growth.
Yeah, of course. Of course, this is
Or
like
opportunity for growth.
what do they call it in a disease where it comes back after it's been dormant for a while?
Remission or in remission?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. When it's in remission, but then it kind of
Comes
like a resurgence.
Mhm.
So yes, it's coming from the history of looking at things incorrectly would be to continue to look at things incorrectly and think that you're right. But where the maintenance of the demoralization and the incomprehensible demoralization of the state, the reason it's incomprehensible because it doesn't make any sense. It's literally not comprehensible. It's insanity that we're trying to comprehend. Sitting with it, as you've done, and I would say these periods of time where the panic attacks haven't come and then they rise up, that rising up is evidence of some degree of you becoming aware, you're becoming aware of some aspect of you that has been doing this. And for you to be aware of it is a willingness on your part to start looking at it. If pain is the touchstone of spiritual growth, my question is, why do we wait for pain? And I would suggest we're not proactive in this discussion. We're not proactive in these thoughts. So we think the only way out is to continue to wait for things to really go wrong before we finally get beaten down to our knees and surrender and give up. We don't think we see it before that, or we do. We've noticed the disturbances, but the demoralization is a desensitization at the same time. We think because we're not feeling it as dramatically as we possibly can, it must not be going on and I'm fine and I'm going to skip along and pretend that everything's fine. I know every day most of what I'm maintaining isn't true in terms of my thinking, my conclusions and all that. They're just best guesses. They're best analysis. They're not truth. They're not reality. And yet I have some of those things still stuck in my core.
Hey, let's go with this, Jack. What's your definition of thinking? Because we're not defining terms all of a sudden, I realize. What is thinking?
Well,
We all have our own well, we all have our own definition, I just realized, right?
Well, if you're thinking your thinking's reality, you think your definition's reality.
Yeah, what is thinking? I'd like JP to answer that. I'd like to refer to my thinking expert.
What do we use a dictionary?
Don't call them that.
All dictionaries are different.
Yeah, to a degree, but it's about consciousness.
What is thinking?
It's a reasoning, it's an analytical process attempting to come to conclusions that are survival based.
What I've been doing, like, let's say I don't like something. I've been taking it a step back and going, what is it actually? Where am I getting this thought? And instead of trying to run with that, like why I don't like it or I do like, I'm like, what? How does this actually work? Like, I find it interesting to figure out where is this thought even coming from? Like, looking at it more of
in relation, Anthony, in relation to Gabe. Now that we're focused on you, magically. How do you see this pertinent to the discussion we're having with Gabe?
Oh, I muted it when Gabe was talking. It's just only, no, I'm just kidding. I was going to say that I got more out of listening to somebody else. I could really listen better, I realized. And it's nice to see that I'm not the only buddy that's having this sensation.
I have some questions for Gabe.
Oh,
yeah, I'd like to defer my remaining time to JP.
Yeah.
Deferment. God, that's what I'm about. Deferment. Hey, Gabe.
Yeah.
So do you believe, because we're using a lot of interesting words today, that you're against yourself?
Interesting.
No, I've never contemplated such a thing.
So
it's an interesting point.
are you, well, All right, do you believe that something you want means that you're against yourself or your future happiness?
Yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah, that there's some
Yeah.
sort of
So,
self.
so my next, my
Okay.
next question is, so do you believe that you're not the way you should be?
Yes, I think
Whoa.
yes.
So let's just look at what I asked you, right?
Yeah.
And I just repeat it back to me. Do you believe you're not the way you should be?
Yes, it
Okay,
appeared or
so
feels as such. Yes.
so the should, the way you should be, the reason I'm phrasing it that way is a fucking judgment. You're making a judgment about yourself, right?
Wow.
Which is
So
what
you're
thoughts do.
saying
It's what
Yeah.
thoughts do.
it's what belief does. It is not
Okay.
what thoughts do. Thoughts are
Okay.
not, thoughts are
Okay,
not
if you don't have any
judgment.
thoughts, you don't have any judgment. You don't
I
have any
got some
belief.
questions for Gabe, but I can't do this if you're gonna do that.
Well,
Let's not divulge into belief and thought, but keep going, JP.
I can't not because all your language is pointing towards it.
No, keep going
well,
on the judgment
listen,
scenario.
let's stop for 1 second. If we're not thinking, we're not believing. So the idea that they are
I'll go with
somehow
that.
separate,
I
the
think
idea
that's
that
true.
they're somehow separate is one more of the fallacies of feeling we're a victim to belief rather than the creators of the thought we believe in. And if that's the case, Gabe, you're not struggling with who you think you should be. You're simply struggling with who you are. You're not struggling with what you aren't. You're struggling with what you think you aren't. So go.
Well,
That's
that
incredible. Thanks for sharing that, Jack. I really like
no,
that.
JP, just so you have the floor a little bit too. Can you continue so that
Yeah, but the floor is in flux. So I can't really. I really would like to help you with something here because it's evident to me because of the language we use. And I really just want to ask you a couple of questions. It's not. I'm not trying to be, you know, in any way, persecute you. I'm just trying to get you to understand that we're using these funny words. And just because I disagree with the order that we're using them in, as Jack just reversed it, but your unhappiness to me right now is a feeling of a belief about, I don't know, a perceived or imagined phenomenon, right?
Yep.
But not an experience caused by the phenomenon.
Wow.
So it's the belief that has the power over you, not what you think has the power over you.
That's great.
See, believing something causes the unhappiness. It's the very reason that it seems to cause the unhappiness. It's the belief in it.
okay?
Well,
Say
a belief in something true
you
does not.
believe that someone or something is morally wrong or evil or psychological. Oh, Jack! God damn it! It's just amazing. All right. Good show.
We can't hear you, JP. You're breaking up, JP. That was ominous.
Yeah, that's
He got killed. I think he. This shit's incredible, Jack. There has to be a disclaimer on this show.
When we believe in something that is untrue, we think it is our reality. And I believe that's where JP's going with this. And the order of my thoughts don't have to align with his thoughts to be aiming at that. It's the lies we believe in. Lies only exist on the basis of believing something isn't true that's true, or is true that isn't true. That's the
Yeah, it's
basis
this
of a lie.
future. It's a future anticipation of pain. So, what is think? What does the dictionary say about the definition of thinking? I'm wondering, because that's something important. If this whole show is about thinking and we don't even have the definition really nailed, it's pretty sad.
You know how many times we've defined that, Anthony? With you here?
Not enough to remember it.
Well, it's convenient that you might think you don't, just to raise a question and draw attention and get mired in some other direction that seems to be so critical and imperative, rather than notice that
Well, I think it
whatever is
is imperative. If it's a core, I'm not saying some tangent thing. I'm saying the main core of our discussion.
It's reasoning as far as a brain goes.
That's thinking.
Yes, rational decisions, remembering experiences.
Well, there's the problem. Here we got a problem, Jack. It says rational. I think that's the first.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the problem is when we think thinking is based on irrational idea that it's reality, that's a major problem in our ability.
Yeah, and we don't
function.
realize it. We think we're using rational, but the first fucking word, it's great.
Well, but Anthony, words do not ultimately define the thing. The idea that the word is sufficient ignores anything that it's not addressing.
Yeah, that's something you don't think about a lot, actually, right? You just know a word is a word, it's powerful, but you don't really realize that,
It's not powerful. It's only powerful when we believe in them as being real. Again, as soon as I think thinking is reality, I have a belief about at the core of my existence that's gnawing at my existence because I am missing all of the other availability of reality to benefit from and to understand.
And also you're using past experience. This isn't some just crazy notion that something bad's going to happen. It's like every fucking time, sorry language, there's this thing, something, it never happens for the best always. It always is the worst possible scenario. This guy Murphy made a fortune off of that theory that whatever can go wrong does go wrong. He didn't come up with whatever
possibility.
He didn't ever. Why didn't he come up with the theory that whatever can go right goes right? What if we come up with that as our theory?
He's saying that inherently. He's saying that in the exact same thing. Whatever can go wrong does go wrong. Whatever can go right goes right.
I never heard that. That is so funny.
Doesn't matter.
All these,
Anthony, the opposite of if I take a position against something, I'm taking a position in favor of something every single time.
Are you sure about that? What about a stalemate? What if isn't there a possible move that doesn't advance the other side?
It's not a point of advancing the other side. If there's a stalemate, that suggests there's two positions.
Right.
You can't have an opposing position if you don't take a position. So the point of words and all this analytical process is that we use it as though it's reality, when in fact reality is not defined by any limitation.
Wait, hold on. I'm slowing this down. Reality is not defined by any limitation. Wow.
If it's infinite, Anthony. If it's
it's only contained by something holding it back, right? That's what you say?
No, it can't be contained by anything other than a thought that's thought to be real, thinking it's containing it. It just limits the expression of that thought from actually expressing the infinite nature of an infinite source. That's what thoughts are designed to do, in my estimation. So
they're designed. Did you use that word? Wait. You used the word designed, and I just heard flashbacks of my dad. That's what thoughts are designed to do.
I would say things have a purpose. Yes. I don't think they're just randomly happening.
Is it possible that they're randomly happening?
Well, to a degree, they probably are, but in that in that randomness, there's a harmony that allows them to function.
This is what I like to talk about. I think this is interesting, this randomness, the difference between harm.
What you generally like to talk about is a distraction to what we've been talking about.
Or myself.
No. Yeah, exactly.
Not necessarily in that order.
I want to go back to Gabe.
Okay. Me too.
So Gabe, JP brought up a couple of questions that gave you pause. And obviously you wanted to listen to that. And if he's here, I'd let him continue. But I also don't want to promote ideas that just basically have us go aflutter in all these other random ways that we can choose to go that create more conflict with looking at things as honestly as we possibly can. And I'm not suggesting I do that all the time. I'm suggesting I'm probing to do that. And I'm not interested in having little bits pass by that aren't looked at and corrected as we go.
I think our biggest conflict was whether or not ideas are beliefs. I mean, thoughts are beliefs. That's where JP keeps getting so mad at. And
the dictionary definition of belief: an acceptance that a statement is true or that something exists.
Yes. So if we think thinking is reality and we've accepted that, at the core of our thinking, we are corrupt, and every other thought will be corrupted that is based on that. So what are we going to feel? Dispossessed, disconnected, not a part of. We need more and more and more. Why? Because we've given up everything. We've given up reality in its essence, real reality, for an alleged reality, for our belief in a thought, for our thinking that is thought to be real. Thinking thought to be real is a belief. And if it's the core of our thinking, it's contaminating all of our thinking. Now, stopping there, we could spend another 800 or 900 years going through all the definitions and trying to figure all that stuff out, or just simply notice that reality has not changed whatsoever, except to our thinking about these things. And if we can concede that, and start functioning on that basis with our thinking is going to explain a lot naturally that we otherwise sit around and debate and try to further analyze and doubt and are uncertain about and all that other stuff that we're constantly trying to fix. Because the nature of an essence would be essential to us, not optional, not negotiable, not something that comes and goes, not something that I have to believe in or have faith in. But if I do and it works, I never have to have faith in it again because I always utilize it. I start to know in my thinking it's right, it's going to work. If I paddle a boat with one paddle on one side, that boat is going to go in circles. I don't have to believe in that for it to happen because it will be a natural outcome of the choices I've made. If I think I'm going to continue doing that and go in circles, and it's going to stop because I hope it stops, and I wish it would, and I think it should. That's all just
And also,
more.
I think the key there is technically you can use one paddle on one side and paddle straight. It's how hard, if you're paddling super hard, you're going to go in a circle. But I could paddle a boat straight with one paddle on the side.
I want you to do that. I want you to go do that.
Well, just because I'm making sure the statements are correct. Like you said, if you paddle on one
I
side.
want you to try that. It doesn't matter how much force you put into it, because if it works, it's going to work in either direction. It doesn't have to be severe for the circle to be a mile long. But if you watch people who row canoes and row rowboats, they are either using two or they're going back and forth.
I think a more accurate statement would be, though, on the teeter-totter.
Anthony, please stop the debate over these subtle little
things. But
things.
listen to what I'm saying before you say it. But
try and get the spirit of what we're talking about.
No, I am. If you would just listen, Jack, listen. I'm saying it'd be a more accurate statement to say if you put more weight on one side of the teeter-totter, like if you're instead of saying a canoe, which is not the same, but because we always talk about the teeter-totter and life. Like if you put too much effort into something, then it's going to unbalance the scale, and you're not going to get any.
Is this the same point in a different version?
Yeah.
Okay, so how many more of those do you need to make?
It sounds like you're in a little bit of a bad mood all of a sudden because you're not even listening to, like, before I even say anything. You're just, but I'll just go on mute. I'm okay with that.
Anthony, I want to mention to you that I can pretty much predict where you're going, and when you don't,
that's good. I want to be predictable. You're making it sound like, oh, I should be shamed. I want to be predictable when I want to be.
Make it sound like you should be shamed.
Well, to me, I'm hearing the tone of voice. I'm feeling shame.
I got it. I'm singling you out. I'm sitting on you on this right now.
No, it's my feeling. It's not that you really are. It's just the feeling I'm having.
Exactly. You know why?
Because you're yelling at me. The tone of voice.
It's the thought you're having about my tone.
Yeah.
Okay. So
and it's probably true.
To you, Anthony,
and it's probably true. There's a lot of truth.
I have enough experience with you to know where you're going to go in these thoughts.
I can handle it if you say it like that rather than just straight yelling at me. The straight yelling is when you're going, Anthony. I
don't know that I was yelling, but I appreciate your observation and I appreciate your reaction. But my point is, Anthony, we're not very good at talking to one another if we're constantly trying to dissect things in a direction that has no basis in anything.
Is it possible that helps communication to dissect it? I mean, is it? Oh, you're making a pretty. I grew up where we dissect everything.
I'll tell you what. This next week, try to divide 1 in half and get to 0, and tell me later if that's going to happen for you.
But that's kind of
I'm
not the same
doing,
thing.
Anthony, I'm not trying to appease every doubt you have. I'm not interested in it all. It's a story that's going to loop and loop and loop. I am not interested in participating in helping
Wait, what if it's a good
condone
loop?
that.
You say the way your tone of voice is loop, and it's like, what if the loop is like it loops in a pleasant way? Isn't that okay? It's the way you're defining loop, right?
You listening?
Well, I asked a question, but yeah.
Do you get the point at all, Anthony? These
if
divergent.
you even have to ask that, obviously there's a possibility. Not only do I not get the point with other people, I don't get the point with myself a lot of times.
Okay. So maybe considering some of these things from an absolute state of thinking, rather than trying to come up with new ways to dissect and divide and conquer these little excursions, maybe that would give you some of the stability you claim you'll find by breaking all those pieces up and finding some fit for them. Maybe. Think that's possible?
Well, if we're even talking about it, obviously it's a possibility.
Okay. So if you can rely on a possibility that you may have a greater knowing awareness than all this thinking you're doing, maybe focusing on that rather than all these other dissected focuses.
What would you rather
to
be, the best at thinking about things and known as a great thinker, or the best in having some knowing, what did you call it? A knowing, all-knowing feeling? What do you refer to it as? I forgot. All-knowing purpose? Is that what you call it? You forgot.
I didn't forget. I'm just not interested in being led down these little paths every 2 seconds.
Well, I'm just asking you what you call it. A knowing.
Doesn't
Maybe
matter.
Gabe, do you know what
Doesn't
it's
matter.
called, Gabe?
Anthony, you're not listening anyhow.
All right. Well, I'll just go on mute. I mean, I'll go on mute.
It's a chance for a discussion, Anthony.
Not if
It's
you
a
just
chance.
keep interrupting me and yelling at me. That's not a discussion.
Does it sound like I'm yelling, Gabe?
No.
Yeah, I can be insistent, Anthony.
Has Jack ever yelled before, Gabe?
Yelled? I don't know about yelled.
Yeah, we could discredit Gabe all of a sudden.
I don't know about yelled.
Yeah, Jack, that's all he does is yell at people.
So, Anthony, your sensitivity is obviously not interested in hearing things that you're not ready to hear, that you don't overrun and rule.
Well,
and
that's true
conquer.
for anybody. Show me somebody that's not
Anthony,
true for.
Everybody is doing what they're doing. What we're doing here is a potential to actually look at what we're doing and actually deal with it in a way that might come close to honesty, that might actually just start to kind of reckon with those things.
We're just settling, at this point, we're settling for coming close to honesty.
Well, if you approach it at all, you're doing it. Rather
No,
than
and don't get me wrong, for our listeners,
in a direction that's consistently manic and obsessed.
For our listeners, and don't get me wrong, I'm 100% on board this. I mean, I had something that I never even thought possible happen that was the greatest thing in the world. So that's why that's where I'm coming from on this. That's not like I don't believe what Jack is saying.
But that's irrelevant if we can't discuss it presently, Anthony.
Well, that's what I say. You're the guy that was yelling, Anthony, are you just going to keep talking? You can't, that's not a discussion. I hate to tell you that. That's not a discussion.
Isn't?
No.
Seems to me that it's a discussion.
If one side is, that's what JP gets upset about, is that you step on him, it's called, where if you just.
Yeah, I do. It's exactly what I do.
Have you ever heard?
Not interested?
Have you ever heard Jack step on anybody, Gabe?
Yes.
You heard it today.
He said yes. All right, so I'm going to go on mute. There's not a lot of I'm not hearing discussion.
No, Anthony, you're not hearing what you want to hear, so you don't think it's a discussion.
No, I'm not hearing what I don't want to hear.
Either way, same thing, same point.
The same. It's the same. I'm not hearing what I want to hear, and I'm not hearing what I don't want to hear.
They come together.
Oh my God! See, well,
If
that's
you want to hear
incredible.
something, it's because you don't want to hear something else.
I love you.
Well, I appreciate that. It doesn't mean that we're functioning well, Anthony, on this level of thinking. Our conversation is based on the thinking we do. It is not just, my mouth is not just happening on its own. It's not just.
Is it based on our beliefs? Just throwing in JP's comment. Is our conversation based on our beliefs?
To any degree that we rely on something as true, yes.
Do we have beliefs that we never thought about? I think that's true. I think you could have beliefs that you've never thought about.
Well, I would suggest you have thoughts you've never thought about, and that's part of what we're discussing now while you're focused microscopically on all the thoughts you're manically thinking about, which prevents the potential to begin to actually discuss this other layer that is
See,
really
there's
the
that
most
yelling.
motivating
There's that tone of
aspect.
voice. That's that tone of voice.
Anthony, you know how many people I've had die in my life, including my daughter now?
Yeah.
That have suffered, and that somehow this conversation continues to go on as though it's meaningless and purposeless and has no impact, and it's a joke. You know what the joke is? That we take ourselves so seriously as to make believe that our thinking is our reality, and to make believe as a result it should be everybody else's. And we don't discuss it well because we don't discuss it. And what I want to do is be as clear as I can be that that's what I'm interested in doing. Not because everyone else should, but if anybody's interested in that, I want to hold the line to the point rather than constantly divide and obscure the point.
Sorry.
And I appreciate you enough that I don't want you to be that same. I don't want you to be another one of those people that I have on my list that have fallen prey to this, if that's possible. I can't do it for you. But if you're doing what you're doing to create your experience and thinking it's so true is to think that we're not having a discussion when it's not going some way that you feel good about or you feel right, think of that. We're still having a discussion. It's just, if you can feel the tone, if you can feel the energy, you're starting to feel the charge of what's actually happening.
Yeah.
And to make believe, like we have for so long, that being nice and kind means lying to people about what you're thinking and feeling, means that the idea of saying anything direct feels like an attack, feels like you're being yelled at, feels like all those things you might not have liked as a child, but you're no longer a child acting that same way.
Yeah.
So Gabe has
crystal clear. Crystal clear.
Thank you. Gabe has had, and I'm not suggesting it's my words because I guarantee you, I struggle with what I speak every day. I do not know exactly what to say. I don't pre-plan it for the most part.
And is that true? Because remember, we were calling each other on the show. Is it every day? Because you said you struggle every day. Is that really a true statement?
Absolutely.
Every day you struggle on it?
Yes. With something. Okay. Yes. Okay. I question, I wonder, I ponder, I look, I live, I experience it.
Did you ever think inanimate objects were doing things to you or talking to you? I don't know what the inanimate objects.
At any point I make believe that I'm not doing it, I think everyone else is, and everything else is doing it too.
Yeah, good point.
Yes. Wow. It can't be half fulfilled. And to Gabe's situation,
it can't be half fulfilled.
Yes. If I do something, I'm not doing something else. We're always fulfilling. If it's good, it's because it's not bad. I'm committing to bad by thinking it's good. It's all combined. It's all whole. It's not split in the way that we want to split it in the positions we want to take and think that they're separate.
And you used to not believe that, right? There was a time where you didn't believe that, right? This is something you've learned, right?
I suspect it's something I've always known. I'm just now talking about it honestly.
Interesting. I like to.
Just like recovery. I always knew when I was drinking that something was wrong. I always knew that I couldn't control it. I didn't do it the way other people did. I always knew that. And so what do? Try to do more of it to fix it. What do we do?
I love that one speaker I heard. I love that one speaker that I heard say that everybody else was at a party and happened to be drinking, and I was drinking and happened to be at a party. I thought that made so much sense. You like that saying?
So Gabe.
See, you just ignored me. That was a way of saying that you're not listening.
No, you're just entertaining yourself. You're not talking about what we're.
Okay, well, you can say that. You don't have to just ignore me.
I can do all sorts of things, including ignore you. I have no interest in ignorance, Anthony. I'm doing my best to speak.
Oh
in
my
terms
God! Now
are
that would
actually...
be mean, right? Wouldn't that be
No,
mean? Or
no, I would say it's accurate.
that
You're
I'm
ignoring
ignorant?
you're ignoring what we're doing here. Yes, you're ignoring what we're doing in these little launches and incursions that
I
you...
thought that I was helping.
I know. I'm sure you did.
Okay, well, I apologize. I'll
There's a
go on mute.
belief. There's a belief. No, you don't listen. You don't need to bow out to be in a conversation because you are being addressed in ways that are uncomfortable for you any more than Gabe. Gabe is dealing with this in a very, very palpable manner. And if we come together to do anything here, I would suggest it's doing what we can that's honest to face this stuff, which should naturally trigger reactiveness and all of those other defensive postures that we've been maintaining and making believe we don't have anything to do with. Speaking to your point about having beliefs we don't believe, we have thoughts we don't think we're thinking. Why, if we think the things we're doing now we shouldn't be thinking, clearly we're capable of making believe we're not thinking the things that we're thinking that are impacting our experience right now, that set up the defensiveness and the manic nature of constantly leaping into these other directions, trying to disavow the discomfort, to neutralize it, to negate it, to have it not there for us. So we don't have to actually talk about this other thing that's lurking, that seems to compel us to do things that catch us off guard and not notice that we must be on guard for that to happen. So Gabe, in my estimation, has been very honest about a dilemma he's facing that has been difficult. And in talking about it openly, gives us all a chance to be able to witness the enormity of what feels like a dilemma that's almost impossible to resolve.
Do I ever do that?
What is that?
What you just said he did.
You know, I think the way you bring it to us, Anthony, is to tell us how many new things you've gotten that were really satisfying and then end up finding out they weren't quite as satisfying. And then you bring new things that you got that you're satisfying and they don't. So I don't think you've actually talked about the demoralized state and the complete inability to come to terms with the difficult, disturbing nature.
I didn't hear Gabe say that. So I got 5 minutes late, but I didn't hear that.
Yeah, well, you were a little behind, and I don't know if it was in that first 5 minutes, but what he's talking about openly is the fact that Gabe, you tell me. I mean, I don't want to overrun the conversation. I appreciate that I do that often. So I must want to do that.
No, I mean, I don't know. I think we need to reboot or restart. What are you asking, Jack, exactly?
Well, in your experience, you know, what I'm hearing, if I heard correctly.
Yeah.
You feel in it. You feel stuck. It feels like a dilemma that's impossible to live with. It's difficult to embrace the enormity of those feelings.
Yes, I don't like sitting in it.
Yes.
It's uncomfortable.
That doesn't sound like demoralization. Jack described it as demoralization.
Yes.
Is it
Yesterday, Anthony, I told Jack it feels very similar to incomprehensible demoralization. And he said it's because it's immoral. So I'm feeling this because it is wrong. I'm feeling wrong feelings, not because I'm wrong, because it is wrong.
And you're choosing them. That's your responsibility and all that is that you choose those thoughts. It isn't just happening. They aren't just happening. They are a consequence of the thinking you're doing about them. And to JP's point, though I don't know that he's made it and seen that the fact that thinking is the basis of belief, just like arithmetic's the basis of numbers, you can't have math without numbers. Just wouldn't. I mean, Maybe there's some other way to do
Well,
it. I
they
don't
use
know.
letters instant. I hate to interrupt again, but they at
You know why,
certain
Anthony? You know what the letters are used for? Different quantifiable numbers. They're basically referencing something. You know what they also use in calculus is the infinite symbol. There
Yeah.
is no number. There is no number for the infinite. So you're right to that point. But they're using it as a quantitative potential to include in a what do they call it, formula or a
Equation.
function. What is it, Gabe?
Equation, just an equation.
Yeah, like a function, I think is.
So what's the
I think-
solution, Gabe? If you were counseling yourself, what would you tell yourself? If somebody came to you with this problem, what would you tell them?
I'm fucking nuts. I'm insane. I'm sick. I'm diseased.
So think of the way you're saying it, Gabe. Think of your words right now.
Mm-hmm.
You're thinking that's who you are. So you must be thinking that thoughts are your reality and they have now created you to be that.
Okay, Jack, let me play the devil's advocate because I know you like
You're doing it well.
respectful challenges.
I like disrespectful challenges.
No,
I'm game.
So just to JP's point, I believe that I am that wrongness, that
Yes.
ill-formed thing or person. I believe that.
Yes.
You're saying I'm believing in my thoughts, not that my thoughts are about belief.
Well, I mean, if we have to get so basic as to point out that if you were in a coma, you wouldn't have any beliefs. If you had no brain, you would have no beliefs. Thinking as a process is the fundamental basis for beliefs and faith and hope and all those subsequent things.
Good point.
So are decisions, conclusions. All of those things are subsequent to thinking. If thinking in its raw form were allowed to do what it was doing, we would be naturally coming to conclusions that we weren't so scatterbrained in trying to think it's up to our own imposition on our thinking to come to those things, because our thinking would be making such good decisions we'd know to act on them immediately, exactly the way it happens when we're actually facing a real threat. There's a clarity, time slows down, things change, the whole dimension of space and time changes because there's a clarity that's brought to our awareness because the threat's actual rather than imagined.
So let me continue on the other side here then.
Sure.
Someone who is religious, who has belief in
Yes.
Jesus Christ as the savior of humanity.
Yes.
You don't think, I don't mean to use the word think, but you don't think that their thoughts, you think their thoughts about that are what's guiding them and
Well, what's belief made up
undermining
of?
them and foundationing them? And
What is belief made up of? Maybe I'm wrong, but maybe it's made up of something other than thinking. I wouldn't know what that is.
I guess I'm saying, the definition of thinking talks about reason and logic or whatever, and then faith is minus those things.
Not always. It can be that we simply, it's like Orville and Wilbur. They had faith that the aerodynamics of flight was possible, but they didn't have the workable model within their human experience. So that's what they made. But it was their faith in something that was real that allowed them to realize it. Think of the word realize. If what I'm realizing is what you're experiencing, the depression and the doubt and the wrongness, that is actually a manifestation that you're overlooking as giving credit to the thinking you're doing, not the person you are, not the character you believe you are, not the persona you believe you are, not the self you think you are. It's just a simple consequence of the thinking that you're doing. And to give it actual credit is to begin to see, Gabe, that the feelings you're having are accurate. The wrong feelings are because you're thinking wrong. It's so closely related. But without the understanding, especially when we've been sick and insane, there's no way to say, oh, I couldn't, if I was insane trying to become sane, I'd never get there because I constantly rely on insane essence. But if the essence we're talking about is an absolute knowing essence, we've always known right. We've always known it. That's the difference here. It isn't something to get to, it's something we've always had. The concession is starting to see that the whole thing has been a delusional episode of wishful thinking. Fantasy is reality. All of these things coming out of this idea that thinking by its nature is right, or that it's real, that it's true, so that anything we conclude must be true too. And that sets people off against each other in these absolutely fantastic, sensational ways that has been incredibly dramatic through human history by killing other people in the name of what we thought was right. It isn't right at all. It's wrong thought of as right. Always.
Jack, I'm not gonna try and brag here. Please follow me. I can do tensor calculus. I understand engineering.
Yes.
And a lot of things that are highly complex, both visual and ethereal, quantum physics.
Right.
What you're talking sounds crazy.
Exactly. Exactly. Now, you know why you can do all those complicated things, Gabe?
Yeah.
Is because they make sense. And if you follow the directions on the package, they'll work, right?
Yeah.
And the directions you're following aren't working, and you know you're wrong because insanity never works. That craziness that you just came to the conclusion of, which we've done before, and I will suggest this is induced craziness. This isn't the craziness that people seem to be born with and that is intractable and you can't change. This is the stuff we're creating that is being changed by what we think about it. That's an induced state, an imposed state. The book refers to that, but in terms of induced self, this, that, or the other thing, imposed self. That imposed self is the self we think we are based in the thinking we're doing. We really believe that's who we are. Now, that's a belief. That's a developed, caustic, poisonous, toxic conclusion. Doesn't mean we can't have it. It means when we do, we think toxic, poisonous actions are the only thing we can take. And what do? Forget things, overlook things, presume things are going to be fine without paying any attention to them whatsoever and wondering, why do they go wrong? To Murphy's law, the fact is that if there's one right way to do something, like Orville and Wilbur figured out the shape of a wing, which is still used today, and they didn't have computers back then. It's the same shape because aerodynamics hasn't changed.
And just for the record, they didn't invent flight. They just perfected it, right? There was somebody else that already had a plane. They just designed how to turn
whatever.
Yeah. I just don't want somebody
did.
listening going, they don't have the story right.
Well, whatever the story is the story. Birds invented flight, but before that, there was obviously an aerodynamic, invisible aerodynamic nature to nature that allowed flight to happen.
Yeah.
And to know that is to see that the invisibility of things doesn't mean something's not there.
And even a bird brain would know that.
Yes. Thank you.
But do you see the
complexity, Gabe, when you can accomplish the thing, is not that.
He was going to say, do you see the something? I hate to interrupt, Jack, but he was going to say, do you see the something? What were you going to say, Gabe?
No, thanks, Anthony. Do you see I guess you do, Jack. Do you see the disconnect
Totally.
In my perception of this whole problem, not just the symptoms or the solution, but the whole foundational perspective of this entire problem?
I also see the connect, Gabe. I know that insanity is always going to feel alone because it's a fraction. It's a fractured state of thinking with no denominator. There's no substance to it, so it can never amount to anything. So the more and more and more we try, the more and more we realize it's not going anywhere. We think it's complicated. That's giving it more credit. It's not even possible. It's impossible. It doesn't even exist except to the thinking we're doing about it. When you can do all those elevated states of math, the fact is they're not complicated. They get easier the more you do them, which is why you practice them, because it's very satisfying to accomplish something that can be done. And it's very dissatisfying and demoralizing to constantly try to do something that can't be done. And
So what did you hear
insanity,
him say, Gabe? What did you hear Jack tell you?
insanity does not exist outside of our brains.
Yeah,
It
that's
isn't somewhere in the universe. And if it is, it has no more power than we think it has. And that means we think something that has no power has power. That again is a conflict. It's the same idea of a lie having power. JP talked about belief has power.
Yeah.
It doesn't have power.
Yeah.
It only affects the experience we're having and the manifestation we're having. But if I believe I can stand on my head and walk down to the beach, I'm probably not getting there today. There's a good chance it's never going to happen. That's the proof that there's absolutely doing this so repeatedly for so long and thinking that somehow there's still hope. We're going to get there, that this is the reliable method, that this is the insanity. Constantly, like you said earlier, it's not just redoing it, thinking it might work. It's pouring gasoline on it to prove it won't work. How well informed do you need to be to see that and not notice you've created it, you're responsible for it, and it's absolutely something you're doing. And as you really come to terms with that, and I'm talking in absolute terms, not in these, well, kind of every once in a while when it occurs to me, I'm talking 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because that is what absolute nature is, always, ever present, not sometimes, not somewhere else, not something else, someone else, us, now, here, together.
that is, to me, Jack, that is a scary thought.
Yes. And I will suggest to you.
That is something I don't want to face.
Yes. Good. Good.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
your honesty, Gabe.
Yeah. So let me suggest to you what you really don't want to face is the face that you think you've been putting on is going to be fully exposed, and you're going to see the fraudulent imposter that you've been making believe is, in fact, that's what you've been hiding. This is they say our secrets kill us. This is the big secret. It hasn't been
that
us
the
all
imposter
along.
syndrome?
I would say that's a good term for it.
Yeah, it's a nice way to put it.
So if we're taking a self seriously that has no basis, the joke is on us, but it isn't funny at all. When you see it clearly, it becomes laughable that we ever took it seriously. And now that's at the root, Anthony. That's the point of this. Starting to see that it's not me doing it, you doing it, the words I use, the words I don't. Now we're talking about an essence that we share that doesn't need to be defined to have. As a matter of fact, even in Jewish tradition, they don't use the word God, they use Yahweh to make the point that you can't define an absolute infinite spirit. And so it's a violation. They consider it a violation. It's a sacred violation to put it into words. For us to make believe that our words are going to get us to this sacred place is to deny that that sacred place exists right now, right here, right now, with us all, everywhere, anyone listening.
Thanks, guys.
So, Gabe.
Yeah.
If you know, you know. And as you begin to admit that you know, and that you're aware, you're going to see the fear clearly. And as you're willing to see it as something you're causing and doing and responsible for, it will dissipate.
Is it possible to also just say, hey, I don't know, and I'm okay with that? Instead of saying, I know, I know, and saying, hey, listen, I don't know, and I'm
Anthony, live with that, please.
I like that better. That's what I
know
say.
You do. I know you do. That's the source of denial. If there's an all-knowing awareness, if there's an infinite all-knowing being,
all-knowing awareness, that's what it is.
Yes.
AKA.
If there is an infinite source, it's an all-knowing source. It's an all-awareness. It's pure consciousness. And if you want to make believe you don't know, that's exactly what the root of the idea is.
Or that I don't have to know. It's not that I make believe I don't. It's like, it's okay if I don't know. I don't have to know everything. I don't have to have every answer.
Anthony, and the kind of knowing we're talking about, there is no answer because there is no question.
But Jack, how do you live your daily life and business and family dealings? And your answer can't be infinite awareness to everyone's query.
Well, how do I know? How do I do trigonometry and advanced calculus without understanding mathematics. If the basis of my thinking is wrong, how have I survived so well so far at all? That's pretty profound, that as a species, we've actually grown in numbers while functioning on a basis that hasn't been true largely. But look at the calamity we've caused and the pollution and the contamination. I'm not suggesting that some of that isn't natural and just happens over the course of history, because there's an evolutionary process going on. Change is happening all the time. But if I'm affecting the change in my own experience so dramatically as to make believe that all I'm doing is all I am is what I think, clearly I am not seeing life very clearly for that family and these people that I claim to be interested in and helping. How can I imagine that something so disruptive and so naturally conflicted is going to be maintained to help me get better, because it's something I can experience on a daily basis, the dysfunction and the disturbance and all that kind of defensiveness and the reactiveness, and think this is the best I can possibly do, rather than just begin to conceive of the fact that our absolute present nature is present. It doesn't mean that the book says we have our head in the clouds and our feet on the ground. It's the beginning of actually beginning to think sensibly. Remember, we talked this past week about the things you forgot to do that caused the problem?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, the memory gets better because we're not conflicted all the time trying to forget things like Anthony's suggesting is better. I just don't want to think I know. Yeah, of course, that's convenient. It's something we can do, but it doesn't mean we don't know. If there's an infinite source, it's impossible not to know it. And to not have in our thinking what we have in reality is to make believe that thinking becomes reality. It's a huge conflict in our human experience, proven in all of written history. And yet, it's no more than each of us do here now together. Each of us have that lever. Each of us make that choice. And I would say, Gabe, your ability to see what's wrong is your ability to concede it as wrong and begin to see that it's simply a choice you're making that's sick. It's just a sick choice to continue. If you operate on that basis and think that's the basis of your operation and you're going to fix it from there, you're going to feel better about it, you're going to get over it, you're basing it on insane thoughts. It's going to continue. It's just going to take a new face, a new place, a new time, a new date with new circumstances and dysfunctional consequences. We've been doing it for a long time. There's plenty of evidence. Do we need to continue? No more than any alcoholic or drug addict needs to pick up the next drink. Will we? Probably, given the propensity. Given the propensity, probably. Even in our conversation amongst people who have gone through this process that gives us that chance to notice what a spiritual experience can do for us in relation to a symptom, struggles with the idea that the absolute is absolute and there are no exceptions and there are no options and it isn't a choice, it's a gift. It's the absolute state of life and nature. And to deny it is certainly something we're capable of doing, but then to live feeling there's a scarcity in the world and we need more is a natural consequence of that. It's not some accident, it's a consequence, and it's always going to come in that form we create. That will create that. And all these different versions we think are our own because we think our problems are our own and nobody else understands us and nobody else can figure it out because these are my problems. So we tell stories ad nauseam, literally to the point of sickness, to try to convey my individual story is real. And if everybody just finally listened to my words, they'd get it. And as far as I'm concerned, the longer we do that with people, the longer we help them promote the idea that they're right and they're real and they're true. And I understand you. Now I understand why you're so fucked up and so sick. Oh God, yes, of course. And that's all you can ever do. And oh, well, we're only human. That's just life. Life's difficult. No, it isn't. Life has done everything to allow us to even have this conversation here now, to exist. It's not because it's complicated. It's because it does what it does as it does it, and it doesn't even think about it. It just knows. That knowing nature is our nature. And of course, it seems crazy. If it didn't, it wouldn't seem crazy not to continue to develop the crazy and continue to maintain it.
If this was my first day in this session, I would say I don't know any different.
Yes, of course. Well, this isn't your first day, and you probably still think that to a degree.
I know, I don't know any different.
Right. Thinking we know is very different than knowing we know. Because the being nature of existence, given that we have a spiritual nature, and spirit, again, Anthony, is a word, doesn't define whatever that nature is. But words are references, they're finger pointing, saying there's a mountain. It's not pointing to the tree on the mountain, and if you tried, it would be difficult to figure out what tree that was. But if we begin to notice that if there is anything infinite, I'm again proposing this, I'm not telling you that there is, I'm simply suggesting that when it's considered and tried on, that's an application. If it might be, it's certainly a better possibility of beginning to entertain it as something that is, rather than thinking I need to conclude it now, and if I can't conclude it now, there is nothing else, and I'm just going to go about continuing to do what I do, and I'm just going to do the same thing and wonder why things still stay the same. And all we do is different faces, different places, different things, different, all that stuff is just hogwash.
And then blame it on somebody else too. Don't forget that.
Yeah, like the hogs. We call it hogwash.
Yeah.
It's a lie. It's a lie. A lie does not exist in reality. It exists only in the idea that something that isn't true is true,
and it's possible for a lie to become the
true
truth, right? A lie can become the truth. You could say a lie and somehow something happens and it becomes true. A lie, it has the
But
possibility.
then, Anthony, it wasn't a lie.
No, something changes. At the time something happened.
Anthony, it couldn't have been a lie when you thought it was a lie if it came true. It was
possible that if you lie, let's say you lie about something, and then
before we go off again in these loops, if you have an idea that you think something's impossible and it becomes possible, that thing was possible while you were thinking it was impossible. It's exactly what we're talking about here.
How about if you say, I own these apartment buildings? It's a lie. But then and at the time you don't own them, but later on you buy them. That lie became true because now
but it isn't a lie when you said it.
I didn't own the apartments. I said I own them. I lied.
Yes, I know, exactly. So you lied, you didn't own them, and when you said you did, it was a lie. The fact
when you buy, then you go and buy the apartments, and then you do own them. So then it's not a lie anymore.
Okay.
Right? So a lie can become the truth.
That is the entire basis of the disease of addiction.
Thank you. Full credit.
No, it's the entire basis of the disease of addiction, Anthony. The idea that a lie can become true. The one thing a lie can never become is true. Why?
If I say that I own these apartments.
If a lie is a lie, that's actually accurate, isn't it?
At the time, yes.
No, right now. If a lie is a lie right now, that's true.
Right.
There's no power in that. It's no longer a lie. If a lie
I'm just talking about
true,
the statement.
Right now,
if
Anthony,
I tell somebody
no. I'm not talking about your story. Right here, right now.
It's not a story, it's an example.
Okay, it's a story. It's a narrative that you're developing to try and make a point so we can launch into some other direction and try to take this whole conversation apart.
I just want to keep terms accurate. Remember we talked about that when somebody says, oh, it always happens. Like,
you know why, Anthony?
Why what?
Because you live on the basis of thoughts that are not true, and you would like to make believe that you are an honest, truthful person, and you're not. To those degrees, I'm not talking about anybody else. I'm talking about you right now. To the degree that you do those things, you are not honest and you are not truthful. And neither am I.
Right.
And neither is anyone else who does those things.
First, let the person that's never done that throw the first stone.
If something is thought to be impossible while it is impossible, that thought is incorrect. It doesn't mean we can't have it. It doesn't mean we shouldn't have it. It means it's incorrect. Because if that thing could be possible, might be possible, is a lot better range of possibility than to conclude that it isn't possible simply because we haven't done it. We think then life is impossible.
Let's go back to the part where Dave thinks that he's really this nut who he is, like the worst version.
Why now?
Because I think that's more important. That's really where I'm looking
Well,
at Gabe's thing.
thank you. So it's more important than trying to diverge into trying to justify that
Yeah.
lies are true.
Yeah. Sorry.
Anthony, right now it's rampant in our world that people believe lies are true. And so they're spouting them as though they're true. And what's happening? People are being hurt. There's damage being done. Isn't to say that shouldn't be happening, because based on that thinking, that's exactly what's going to happen. So if we have anything to offer each other, it would be to start to see these things accurately and think about them accurately, and coincidentally, coinciding the coincidence of our interaction here, start to speak about it accurately, rather than in all these other divergent terms where we're trying to like see what we can do with reason and how we can make it look real and all this. Isn't this fun? It isn't that fun when you begin to realize that living with fantasy as reality is not fun at all. It's a very damning reality that we think we're in when we're not in it at all. It's insanity to make believe that that's actually our reality.
So let's get back to Gabe then. Enough of me. Sorry.
What about me?
How are you going to overcome this problem that you were talking about that was very honest?
What about what I'm doing right now is sitting with it, as Jack has suggested. And it sucks to sit in it, and it doesn't feel comfortable, and it's annoying, but that's the best possible thing to do right now.
I'm going to make another preposterous statement. And that is, even when we think we're not sitting in it, we're sitting in it. And that's the problem. We really believe our thinking is reality and keeps us from it, while we're playing dodgeball in the world, trying to keep people from seeing it because we are projecting an image it's not there. And that does not make us very good, productive people, because we're at odds by nature, hoping people don't notice us. And to not be noticed is to do nothing. It's to end up being neutralized in our capacity to actually be noticeable, because something we're doing is valuable to enough people to say, hey, I notice you, you count, you matter, you're making things happen that matter, make a difference in a way that actually helps, that are beneficial.
I see it, Jack, as I see you, you matter, I'm going to take you down. I want to be on top of you. I want to.
Right. So you can see the fight.
I want to belittle you. I want to be.
Right.
You know, and if I'm not, if I can hide, then nobody sees me, then nobody wants to take me down.
Right. So think of this now. Think of it in terms in the inner experience that you're creating in that thinking. You think the best thing you can be is invisible.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
Now, how would you feel like, how would you matter and count if you were invisible? What's invisible in math?
Nothing. Yeah. I don't want to matter or count, Jack. I want to be invisible.
Zero is the invisibility in math.
Yeah.
What does it do? Nullifies everything else. Or it does absolutely nothing when you add it to something.
Yeah. I want to not feel.
Not exist.
Not exist. Yes.
Yeah.
Bingo.
This is a suicidal thought, that the best we can be is not being at all. Think of that. This is an addictive thought. And addictions, every symptom that we're addicted to is a suicidal tendency, because nothing we're ever addicted to is healthy for us. Ever. That's the source of addiction. The reason is because it's a corrupt thought that has no basis in reality. What good could there possibly come from that? Yeah. There isn't anything for anything to come from. To imagine our actions are based on insanity is to act in ways that make no sense. And yet we survive, which I would suggest, Anthony, to your question about nature, I would suggest that the survival actually seems to be greater than this imposition of insanity, this induced insanity that we claim to think is all of our experience, our totality of who we are. Even despite that opinion, we seem to be functioning sufficiently to grow as a species. And Clearly, sex has a lot of motivation in population growth because it feels good. If sex didn't feel good, there's a good chance we would be dwindling in numbers radically. But yet, nature set it up that way. So it must be a direction that we're somewhat designed to do. Maybe we've overrun that direction. I don't know. Given the number of insane possibilities that have come that don't reflect nature, anything unhealthy may be an example of what we're doing that obviously wouldn't be healthy in terms of a species. But yet we're growing. We're growing. More people are eating today. The levels of economies have risen for people. There is lots of evidence that there's something at work that's actually functioning on our behalf, despite all of the other misgivings and mistakings. And yet, if we can participate in those too, and actually start thinking in ways that don't have consequences we don't know how to fix, and always act as though if they're not happening for the next 30 years, we're never going to face them, and 30 years later start wondering, how do we fix this now? We're burying nuclear waste in places that are designed to hold it for 100 years. It's going to last 1,000,000 years, 1.5 million years. The waste, that's not a plan. I mean, it's a plan, but it's not a good, healthy plan. It's not a plan that's actually accounting for us, because we're not going to be here when that's dealt with. And to think that because it goes beyond our generation or the immediacy of a 10-year period as a solution is sick. Because we're basically creating a world for the children we call our future, and we're offering them a future that's going to be very damned if we don't start speaking in ways that aren't damned in the way we're thinking. Not something we have to do, it's certainly something we can do. But I would say it would be worth doing in a way that's actually addressing how things are at the most elementary level to your question earlier, Kate. How does this affect my family? I don't try to be neutral. I try to actually step into the challenges and realize that the limitations I have about what I feel I'm able to accomplish are always thoughts that are untrue. And in recognizing that, I can take steps in direction where I may have no hope of ever achieving it, but the fact that I'm stepping in that direction gives me a greater chance of things happening than if I do nothing at all and sit at home and wait and wonder why they're not happening.
Not wait and wonder, Jack. Cower and hide.
Yeah. And listen, Gabe, I do those things. I have a shyness. I have a weakness. I have vulnerability. I have insecurities. They have become clearer to me as this process has evolved and as we've had this conversation. They become much clearer to me. I'm aware of them more. That thing that I used to think I needed to fix and get completely isolated from now is my human experience. And that sensitivity is my awareness. It's my body giving me information. It's my body language speaking to me. And when I feel that queasiness, I know that I'm really thinking something that isn't healthy because I'm sick. I'm like, I have seasickness. That's what it feels like. And those things have become more obvious to me rather than less. So part of the embracing what you're doing is getting used to the fact that your body's going to give you sensations. And I would suggest they're accurate sensations for the senses, because the senses provide us data that's raw. It's the thinking we do about that data that determines how we act on it. But the senses are raw data. If I didn't have a brain working and I touched something hot, I wouldn't pull my hand away. People in comas do not react to that sort of thing. My thinking is central to my functional capacity. And belief and faith and hope in something that's not true is to have no need for belief and faith at all, because I can have as much as possible and never have that thing happen in any meaningful way. And yet when it comes to an absolute source, all I need is the immediacy of faith. And if I'm really looking at it honestly, I begin to realize I never had faith at all. I never need to have faith because it's the absolute state of my nature. It's always been that way. It's not always been that way for me. It's been that way for everyone else. Anthony, that's why I hang in this conversation, despite all of the conflicts and the reactions and all that kind of stuff. I know we know this. I know, though, we're not talking about it. So as a result, we're not thinking about it accurately. So the thinking that I propel, I don't want to be engaged in causing more reaction. And if I'm causing it, I want it to be obvious enough to be noticed so people don't make believe it's not happening. Noticing it is the beginning of our awareness. When it's wrong and we notice it, it's the beginning of noticing that we're absolutely capable of noticing what's wrong, so we do not have to continue in the direction that's causing ever. We're free, absolutely free. So free, we're free to do it too, to continue. Self-loathing and self-hatred is not hating ourself, it's hating the self we think we are based on the thinking of itself that we're utilizing, we're choosing, we're doing. Nothing more, nothing less. It's simple because it's mechanical. If I think thoughts that are wrong are true, I'm going to create inner conflict, emotional turmoil, and mental instability. Mental anguish on top of it. I'm going to feel pain. That's what pain is for, to tell us something's wrong, not to confirm that it's real. We use it as a function to say, well, it feels so real, it must be reality. No, it's a concept, it's a manifestation that we're capable of producing as a result of the thinking we're doing, but we're being told it's wrong so we can stop, not so we can continue to prove it's right. Yet we're able to do that. It's a sick direction because we're not taking the immediate direction, that we're going in the wrong direction, because that desensitization has gotten us so numb that we think, well, someday it'll get better, which is, I suspect, why pain is the touchstone of spiritual growth in terms of the book. Why? Because we have to hurt before we're actually able to notice what's going on, because we've become so entrenched in denial and fighting and pretending that we think it's still going to work someday, somehow, and prove that everything we've ever invested in that direction has finally paid off. It's insanity. Induced insanity, by the way. It's different than the medical diagnosis. And yet, it is a lot about seeing and hearing things that aren't happening. So when I'm listening to the voice in my head that's talking about things that are insane because I've asked for that thought to think for myself, or to have me think for myself by thinking of my thoughts as myself, I'm actually giving voices to a conversation going on in my head that are all made up, all to justify the reality of my experience or my choice to make believe that my thinking is real and true. And now I have voices in my head to prove it, talking about all sorts of different things. So I'm hearing and seeing things that I'm creating a narrative imagination that isn't even thinking that the imagination now and the narrative I've created is in fact reality. It's not. So Gabe,
Yeah.
to the wrong you're feeling, you will feel wrong when wrong is felt in thought. When it's seen, you'll know it. And part of the shift is, rather than seeing all the wrong you're doing by thinking the wrong thought is right, you'll begin to see that we're in an environment that is filled with a lot of wrong, and that can also create that same sensation in our bodies. The awareness grows, and sometimes it's mistaken for being the same old thing, but when it gets accurate, that's what compassion is about. That's what understanding is about. It's seeing what's under our standing, our positions that we take. There's substance there below the standing we take. There's something going on here that isn't in view, and yet we know very much is real. We know that it's there. If we didn't know so clearly, we wouldn't have such a perfect gauge to identify what's wrong and to see it in others and see it in ourselves. And my contention is we don't see it in others clearly when we think they're to blame and they're to fault, because when we see it clearly, we see them with the same compassion we have for our own experience, recognizing that it's simply something we're doing rather than something we actually are. Natural. Forgiveness is having things as they are. It isn't having them larger or smaller, even great, huge things, infinite things. If they're infinite, it's probably not worth trying to dumb them down, but let them be as they are. If they are, they are. And if that's the nature of existence, it might be worth mentioning that to my thinking. and introducing that to my thinking. And how do I do that? Talk about absolute terms with others. Consider these ideas. Consider the concepts. If they fit, you will know by the virtue of your shifting experience and seeing that you start not doing things you used to do all the time and not thinking things that used to plague you all the time. And Gabe, I know you've had that experience.
Yeah.
So in one respect, we've had perfect experience, and yet we seem to pay more attention to this one filled with fear by creating more fear to confirm that we're avoiding it. It just doesn't make add up.
Which speaks to the ongoing issue of addiction. You don't go to rehab for 30 days, get better, get sober, and you're done. Like, it's not as sad as that is or whatever, but you're not fixed. You don't go to the shop and get repaired and you come back out a new car. You don't. So,
well, again, the idea that recovery from a symptom does not mean sanity from the cause of that symptom, from the disease, from the substance of that addiction, from the actual disease. And if the actual disease, as the big book says, is mental, then this induced state of insanity is what we're struggling with in emotional sobriety. And the spiritual malady is imagining that our spirit is only what we think it is, and that spirituality is limited to our thinking. That, again, is denying reality while we're claiming reality. Again, to this point earlier, Anthony, if I claim something's good, I'm simultaneously claiming something else is bad. If I think I have reality, I'm denying reality simultaneously. And something that's absolute, if it's denied, it has no impact on it. So I never really deny it. I'm just constantly in a state of thinking about it to maintain the ideas, because I have to obsessively think, because I only live within the confines of my thinking. They don't even live there. They're just being imagined to be real as they go around and around and around and around and around, trying to serve the self I think I am. So they become self-serving, self-centered thoughts, thinking only about seeming me because I think that's who I've become. It isn't true. It's just something I do. If I do something, I can't be that thing I do. I can't become a car because I drive a car. I'm a driver. I can't become the car. But I can utilize that car if I identify the role I'm capable of playing and the role it's capable of playing. Now I'm working, when you're asking about the family, now I'm working within reality, functioning at a level that would be functional and attractive to most people because it would be stable. There would be something about it that's stable rather than unstable and doubtful and causing uncertainty and causing anxiety and being a creator of that anxiety and stress that people are already struggling with, and having them struggle more trying to make sense of yours now on top of theirs. That is not a good basis for a healthy relationship. And if we care at all for the people we love, if we care at all for the people we love, it would be worth noticing this, because so much of the dependence we have on people is not healthy. We over-depend or over-demand and make believe that our demands are going to secure our prowess and our power, or make believe our dependence on them is going to make up for the independence we claim we have by thinking about things that are not dependable whatsoever. It's very simple. And as a result, can be the most complex seeming thing possible, because anything other than that single premise becomes incredibly complicated when you deny the premise. Within the context of a knowing awareness, what happens becomes unimaginable, especially when all we've been imagining is the doom and the gloom and the limited ideas we've been maintaining as being reality.
Yes.
And Anthony, you've witnessed this. Listen, Anthony, you have hung in as long as anybody. I know that this can be incredibly difficult.
I just learned that this meeting is really about whether or not you're insane. I've been trying to come up with all these great topics. That's all this is. It's like how to know if you're insane or not, and how to not be insane.
Well, ultimately, it's to realize you've never been insane. You've just been thinking you were, because the thinking you were using.
Bingo, drop the mic right there. That's it.
Think
I
about
just
some of the
realized that.
things in the book. Think about some of it says, let go absolutely. The result was nil till we let go absolutely. Completely abandon yourself, utterly abandon yourself. Think of that. They're not saying refine this self, get a better ego.
Reboot. They didn't have the word reboot yet.
Yeah.
Hey, when I was stopping drinking, I was like, God, if I could just go one day without alcohol. Now it's like, if I could just go one day without insanity, right?
But listen, the freedom here, and Gabe, this applies to this idea that if you feel condemned to embracing these thoughts, you're going to feel condemned embracing them. When you begin to realize that real freedom comes from just honestly saying, all I'm doing is looking at things that don't really exist, except to my thinking about them, except to the serious nature of the thinking I'm doing because I think they're real. As you begin to really contemplate them as they are, they vanish, kind of like in the process of acceptance. When you really accept, and my contention is most guys I've ever worked with and people, they don't really accept things. They just say that because it's convenient to say that and think that you're accepting things. But wherever you're not really accepting it, you're still going to have struggles. So this absolute state, that tends to go away because you begin to realize that when whatever's happening is happening, regardless of what I think of it, is starting to allow things to be what they are rather than wait till I determine what they are, conclude what they are, decide I like them or not like
Jack,
them.
that's exactly what I was saying. Allow them to be. Just I don't have to control it. Just allow them to be. That was what I was trying to say.
Okay, so the other thing is, Anthony, they're already that way regardless of whether you allow them.
Damn it.
Now, but listen, that's the unifying principle. The distinction, though, is as you truly allow them to be as they are, it's the concession that they are as they are that allows you to realize you're thinking about them as
I don't know if I
irrelevant.
could ever get to that level.
You're there. You're already there. Just
that sounds.
Hear me out. When we're in opposition to them, we're going to think insanely about them because if they are, they are, and we're thinking they're not or shouldn't be. It's the same thing we're doing in our experience.
Good. 2 hours later, I'm getting this thing. 3 hours later.
4 years.
3 hours.
Listen, we don't live in a world that's encouraging this line of thinking. So it does seem, to Gabe's point, preposterous and insane to even consider this. But to insanity, everything that's sane seems impossible and preposterous. So begin to see it that way, begin to say, of course it seems preposterous. Sanity. Sanity would, of course, seem preposterous because I've been thinking I've been sane while I've been insane. Of course it seems preposterous to actually look at sanity.
I like how you said you're not insane, you just think you are.
Yes. That's the whole problem, Gabe.
I just took a step back for the bigger picture, like walking in day one to a room. How can you get, you can't make this leap. I mean, it seems
exactly.
How did those guys do that in 12 hours in the Oxford group or the 6 steps or whatever?
That's what they call the gift of desperation. When the guy says, I wish you all the gift of desperation.
But remember, Gabe, we've effectively treated symptoms of addiction so far.
Yeah.
Bill talked about when he did the 12 and 12, when he wrote that, he'd never done the steps. And when he did the steps, because his spiritual advisor said, of course you can't write about it, you never did them. When he did them, he began to realize that emotional sobriety was ultimately the goal. And that was now back in the 50s. And he really thought this was going to be the big new wave. And in that emotional sobriety letter, he wrote about that. It never became the wave. Well, he died in 1971, I think. Never happened. He saw it. It never happened. It still hasn't happened because we're still thinking about it as a management program rather than an essence of an absolute nature that cannot be negotiated and you can't leap to something that's always been where you are. So you can't leap out of it. You can't leap into it because you're starting to see the absolute nature as something that is very different than the thinking process that's based on analyzation and comparison and reason. There's no reason for it. There's no way you can analyze it. You can't calculate this. It's incalculable. It's incomparable because it simply has never been anything other than what we have always had. It is the essence of our entire existence. And to think otherwise is certainly possible and we're free. But to think that that thinking becomes reality is the beginning of addiction, and addiction is actually an admission we're lying.
And that makes a lot of sense because Gabe is great with numbers, but you just said this is incalculable. So it's like, hello.
Yeah. But even, Gabe, in mathematics that you're great at, what happens when mathematics starts approaching the infinite?
Yeah, it gets smoother. The number of things drop away, and it
Well,
all
and if you
seems
can,
all seems to
continue,
align. Yes.
And the faster it goes, the heavier it gets.
well, it gets graceful, which is what calculus was designed to do. It showed an elegant gracefulness, which reveals that, you know what happened? They used that infinite symbol, Anthony, which is not a number, like zero is not a number. But they used the infinite symbol, and all of a sudden, the choppy, broken lines of algebra were elegantly smooth and gracefully smooth. But I imagine, Gabe, from what I've read, could be wrong, could be remembering this preferential to the point I'm trying to make. But it seems to me that while numbers begin to get graceful, because what's happening is everything that's excessive falls apart.
Falls away.
What's excessive about my thinking? All the ideas I have that have nothing to do with reality. What am I doing? I got a management program to keep all this stuff. What am I afraid of letting go of? The thing I think identifies me. I think I'm letting go of my life to let go of those things when I look at that pain and see it and realize that if I look at it squarely and honestly, it dissipates as quickly as fog dissipates in sun.
But
I'm afraid because I really think
the last digit
I'm going to
of
die.
pi, if I just knew the last digit of pi, everything would be right with the world.
Yeah. Well, and knowing it doesn't end is another way of beginning to see that we're given metaphors in this existence that tell us. What's interesting about those numbers, how do they define those numbers, Gabe?
Yeah, with symbols, right?
But, well, they call them irrational numbers. The numbers that go on forever are called irrational. The numbers that stop are called rational. Again, we think thinking is the basis for ration and reason and sanity, when in fact it's the basis to express this ultimate absolute nature. But the other point about numbers, as I understand it, is that as infinity is approached, it starts getting cleaner, but it also then math falls completely apart. They can't keep it together because there's no math in infinity. It's not a numerical, time-based, dimension-based essence.
Hey, are you going to wrap up with a nice recap? You're supposed to say what you're going to say it, and then recap.
Well,
I would say re-listen.
Yeah, today's been monumental, Jack. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Gabe. Thanks, Jack.
Yeah, Anthony, I appreciate it. And
precisely
Anthony,
what I needed.
When you hear me yelling at you, consider that's the best I can do at the moment. And
I didn't say yelling; it was just the inflection, the tone of voice.
I get it, but it's not that I don't want to be doing that. I want to get your attention.
Yeah.
And the attention I want to get is the attention that isn't as comfortable as the thing that you could write off because you think I'm being kind and tolerant with you, because my sense is it is not kind or tolerant to be dishonest. And I'm not always good at this. And I want to get better at it because I don't want to allow things to continue that I suspect are just a repetition of this other chronic nature. Because to interrupt that is to begin to actually address it and begin to engage around it. If you
whatever you're doing is working, buddy. Keep it up.
Well, I'm thinking more about you right now.
Thinking. There you go. There's thinking.
I want you to see as you go that you have a greater awareness and that it's perfectly capable of being employed as you begin to notice that it is in fact your nature. It's not some odd thing that you need to get and go to. It's not something you need to buy. You're not going to get more of this.
You know what's funny is all those things that used to bug me about the mess. I'm like, I'm okay with them now today. I'm like, they're exactly where they're supposed to be. That's exactly what needed to happen. Whatever it was is right.
Well, take the supposed to out too. They're just as they are, whatever.
Yeah, I don't have to put so much into inanimate objects.
You don't have to put anything into it. They're already inanimate. They're doing what they do all by themselves. And yet your
They're not
body
trying to
is filled
destroy
with
my.
them.
They're not trying to destroy my life.
Well,
But
think of that thought again, though.
let me try and compare Anthony's to my issue is, Anthony, about the objects, the cars, the things,
Yeah.
the guitars. The thinking or the methodology or the basis is still the same, even though I don't deal or care about any of those things, Anthony. And you don't care about my things and my thoughts and my professions and business stuff, but the basis is still all the same, Jack. The basis for anyone listening, the basis is still the same. The symptom is different.
Now, think of that, Gabe, in relation to your idea that thinking the absolute is preposterous, and yet we have evidence of that similarity. That's not just similar, it's the same. If it's the same, it's the same. What would that be? Something that doesn't change. We have all these different versions that we use, and we all have different aversions to those versions, right? We're all interacting and interrelating and interreacting with things based on that same problem. If there's a sameness to it, that's the simplest thing possible, which is something, the absolute is something that doesn't change. It always stays the same. So the opposite of it is the same. Half of it is the same. It's the whole. There is no division. There is no limit. To even think of it as whole is to think of it as one. It isn't even one because it doesn't even function within mathematics. This is the dimension that this is a true essence of essence. And as you begin to contemplate those things, I guarantee you, Gabe, what you think is preposterous now, when you start seeing the problems you have and have that awareness that there's an infinite source that you're absolutely connected with and can't be apart from, those problems will take on the size of the problem rather than this glaringly huge magnification that you think you are when you think that thinking is who you are, and your eyeball is stuck right up against it and wonder why it's the only thing you see.
And it's possible there's a solution that you can't even imagine that would make everything right.
Well, I'll tell you what that solution is, Anthony. What? There is no solution in an essence that never has had a problem. Oh. So in an absolute state of being, all these things we search for and look for don't even exist because they've never, the cause and effect is very different because the effects don't have the same effects as the sick thinking that we cause.
Not the spoiler alert at 3 hours into it or 2 hours into it.
Well, if the essence is cause, I don't know if it's cause because typically effect comes with it. But if the essence is cause in the absolute state of being, the effect is love. And that has been commonly thought of as the nature of existence at the most essential aspect. If that's the case, and this is the measure that the Oxford group used, they use those absolutes to say, how is our thinking and behavior adding up to these pure ideas, these pure concepts that are absolute?
Yeah, and just for the record, Gabe said that I don't really care. I like how he dismissed it. He's like, your problems, and I know you don't really care about mine, but I'm saying I probably know Gabe better than the top 1%, because I'm in a group with only a few people, and I know, so I do care about it. So I'm saying
I do care too about the things you are talking about, but the basis we're operating on is the same effed up.
Yeah, that's why I try not to say the exact problem. I try to,
I said my, a business and business decision I made was poor, and that's all we need to know.
Right. That's all you need to know.
Yeah. So,
and I like JP's thinking, and I saw the light go on, just to summarize, where he said, is it possible that you're plotting against, you think that you're the problem, and I could see you going, wow, yeah.
But keep in mind, if you're the problem, it's not your thinking that you're doing, it's your essence as a being that's a problem. Now, what do you have? Impossibility. You have nothing to solve because you're a problem, and that's the end of it.
That's not a good solution. I don't like that.
Exactly. Exactly. So when we think who we are is what we think we are the problem. And Gabe, if you re-listen to this, you're going to hear you say, I am wrong, I am bad, I am disconnected. Yeah. All of those sentences are coming out of that idea is in fact who you are, rather than I'm thinking wrong, I'm thinking disconnected. All those things will always be the same because they have no substance. There's no dimensional capacity for them to have any place. So why wouldn't we feel we have a place feeling disconnected? Yes, because we have a place. That other thing has no place. So that's what the disconnect is feeling. We're feeling the lack of substance in our thinking that has no basis. That fractured state of mind is the idea that we can fracture off a thought and have it become reality, when in fact
That's what I
there's no
try to do.
denominator.
That's what I try to do. I like to
Oh.
split pieces up.
You don't have to tell me that, Anthony. So listen, I want to hammer on those edges to make them more obvious. I want to exaggerate them publicly. When you say you want to bow out of the discussion, I'm actually asking you to step into the discussion.
Well, no, I didn't say I wanted to. You said I don't want to hear you anymore.
No, I didn't say I didn't want to hear you. What I wasn't interested in is the repetition of those incursions.
Isn't that how you
little
become
forays.
great? Is by repeat? Oh, okay. You just didn't like it's not the repetition. It's the repetition of what?
Uselessness and something with no substance. That's the repetition.
You know what the opposite of uselessness is, right?
I would say usefulness.
Right. So I'm pretty damn close, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah. But the problem is, Anthony, when the two are together, they're options, both of them simultaneously. No, get this. This is a point in sobriety. Okay. When I think I'm useless, I don't think I'm useful at all. That's impossible.
Yeah. It's all or nothing thinking.
Exactly. And yet, when we're thinking about insanity, there is nothing. So there can't be all or nothing. It's just an absolute non-existent state.
And I realize this meeting really is about sanity. You know what I mean? Just trying to, what's it about? Oh, it's just about trying to be sane for one more fucking day. You know, like, oh, I get that. What time is the meeting at? You know, that's what people can relate to.
So maybe this will give you something to think about for the week, since you've already concluded your next week. You're always sane because you're always real. You're always based in an absolute truth. And the only thing you're thinking is that you're not. That's the problem. It's thinking is so powerful as to actually eliminate and negate, which is why people struggle with negative thoughts. They're constantly trying to negate reality. They're trying to negate what's happening. They're trying to negate their circumstances, what people think.
So what if you're manifesting? Is that the total opposite? Like, let's say you want something so bad that all you do is think it and try it. Is that? That's
you know when you feel horrible, Anthony?
Yeah.
You're manifesting that.
Yeah.
And to Gabe, that's a good point to mention. We're always manifesting the experience we're experiencing based on the thinking we're doing. That's the primary cause of, I wouldn't say it's the primary cause, it's the primary optional cause the primary choice that we're capable of making is in the thinking. The senses we don't choose because they do what they do perfectly. What we choose is to interpret them. Choice
and then can you give us an example? Because I think Gabe's best question was like, well, how do you use this in life and business? So how do you use what your philosophy, all-knowing, for your like when you have a business, they say, hey, we need to know which way you're going to vote on this thing. So how do you use this system to overcome that? Or how does it work? I need an answer.
Very simply, the book says whenever we are disturbed, something's wrong.
We pause.
If I have a sense of doubt and uncertainty and I act on that doubt and uncertainty, my action is going to be doubtful and uncertain. And so
that's
it's going to lead to circumstances. The ultimate knowing of this isn't knowing all. Santiago struggles with this. It isn't knowing every last detail of everything going on in every brain that's happening. It's knowing that everything going on in every brain that's happening is going on. That's it. Now we know everything about everybody's thinking. It's beginning to see that the personal experience of this is the peace and the quiet and the stillness and the presence that we always seem to find in meditation when we're looking. But think when we don't look, it isn't there. It's always here. It's always ours. And it's always our Geiger counter telling us what is disturbing and what isn't disturbing, so we can make better decisions, not just for our seeming self, but for everybody and everything.
How would you answer? Go ahead. The alignment.
The alignment with this is being able to do what you suggested earlier, the unimaginable. Because I'm now I'm taking the lead. I'm not trying to think it through. So I would say things like, I wouldn't have even thought of this.
Yeah, exactly.
And yet Jack, it's happened. So that's the wisdom of intuition being expressed through thinking. I suspect that's thinking's ultimate natural job. That's
And the
its
opposite.
purpose.
And does that answer your question, Gabe? I think that was a great answer, right? Because you're like, how do I use this when they need an answer? It's like you just don't rush, or right? Is that what you're saying?
But you
Just-
can.
I think the answer, right, Jack, I mean, is practice these principles in all our affairs.
Yeah.
Well, and also begin to realize that the principles are already the basis of our human existence, and they are life's terms right now, whether we practice them or not. What
And
we're
the word
practicing-
affairs doesn't mean like it's got a couple of different meanings. I thought that when they said
Not the
practice
meaning you think, Anthony.
I practice this in all my affairs. I don't understand the problem.
But seeing principles is beginning to see that they do not change while my thinking about them changes. It's not to say my thinking about them shouldn't change, but if I begin to align rightly with them, my thinking will be healthy because I'm aligned with nature, and it will begin to think naturally rather than unnaturally and abnormally. It will be normal because health is normal to beings. It's natural.
Yeah, right. And
So
the
again,
thought that it's
though,
never
I want
going
to
to
go back
happen
to
again
Gabe real
is
quick, Anthony.
the thought that it's never going to happen again is ridiculous, right? Oh, okay, I went to this meeting and it's finished, right? You know this is going to happen again, and it's like a fire drill. They practice so that when the fire happens, they know exactly what to do.
Well, it's just we're exercising on a daily basis is what we're doing.
Yeah.
We're running. Every circumstance is always new. We think they're old because they seem similar, but they're all brand new all the time. So we're always facing things that we've never faced before in the newness of the nature of the present moment. So to think that they should only be what we think they are, once again, shows how dominant we think our thinking is and how demanding we get about how things are. So going in that direction, it begins to you begin to realize the practice is realizing that everything that can happen is always capable of happening.
And something you didn't even think of. Not even like what you're hoping, but like something you didn't even think of that's better.
Yeah. Well, better, worse, it's irrelevant. The fact that it's possible if you become more familiar
I'm only
with
interested in better. I don't like anything but better.
I know. You know why?
Because anything is less than
because what you're thinking is worse. You're trying to outrun the thinking by only doing better. That's exactly what trying to feel better. It's exactly what trying to feel better about what's worse is what causes addiction. When we're managing it, trying always to feel better about it, we're maintaining the problem by thinking we're not having anything to do with it, and we're denying it, and we're fighting it, and we're winning the battle.
It's like that scary.
We don't win it.
It's like that scary movie where the house is haunted and they're trying to get the girl, and she calls the police department and they said, yes, we've traced the call. And she's like, yeah, it's coming from your house.
So, Gabe, the manifestation aspect is interesting because we're manifesting both the fear that you're creating that you think is happening to you.
Yeah.
And also the potential to continue to maintain that fear by maintaining the idea that what you need to do is more of the same thing that caused it. We're always going to manifest a consequence of experience, always, if we're conscious.
His mute is on. Gabe's mute is on.
To begin to see.
I'm talking to myself. Sorry.
He's still listening.
Yes, I'm talking to myself.
That's what this meeting is about. And that's what this, ironically, that's what this meeting is about, is your self-talk.
No, there is no self to talk to.
He said he's talking to himself.
Yeah, I
know, he's joking.
I'm joking. Yes, I'm joking. The conscious contact is not there. It's disconnected.
Well, you think it is.
I think it is.
Yes, it's there. Well, you think if it weren't there when you thought it wasn't there, you wouldn't be insane. You would be disconnected. You would be the ruler of the universe because you have just now determined that you're capable of disconnecting from reality. It's the fact that it's there and we think it isn't there that again points to the insanity of the thinking we're doing as being reality. It's always there. We're always connected. That's why that leap you talked about earlier, you don't have to make a leap to be where you are. We create all those narratives to make it seem impossible so we can justify continuing. Making something seem impossible isn't impossible any more than thinking something you can't do is something you can't do when all of a sudden you do it and say, oh, I thought that was impossible. It was always impossible.
Or something different, something better even happens, something that you didn't even think was possible.
Better or worse are the same thing, Anthony.
Yeah,
if all you're doing is worse, anything else is going to be better, by the way. any incremental movement in a direction that isn't worse is going to be
the good
better.
news. That's the
Yes,
good news.
exactly.
There's some good news and some bad news.
So if we're sitting around constantly feeling doom, we're feeling the doom of the present in our thinking.
Yeah.
Not in reality, but if we continue to maintain it, we're going to manifest
That's a good
circumstances
point.
to justify it.
Right.
That's the manifestation, Gabe.
And anything you do is a huge improvement.
No, that's the manifestation. You're right, Jack. That's like not only manifestation of thoughts, but manifestation of action or lack of action.
Yeah.
They all follow through. At the end of the 12 step and the 12 and 12, Bill says, understanding is the key to right principles and attitudes, meaning that when we start thinking about principles rightly, our attitudes start to adjust so we can actually fly. Attitude is something a plane has to keep it in space, to keep it moving, functioning. And right action is the key to good living. Because now there's the order. Understanding first is the key to right principles. I understand right principles rightly, my attitudes straighten out, my actions start to straighten out. This idea that understanding is the booby prize or something that we don't need to do. We need to take right action first. Think about that. Within the culture of AA today, people say that a lot.
Yeah.
Just take the right action. Well, that's dismissing the understanding, the principles, the attitude, and we're just concluding that we're going to make the right. If we were able to do that, we'd be there.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah, think about that. Fake it till you make it. Lie until you don't. What are the chances?
And everybody understands that in AA. Oh, okay. Fake it till you make it.
We'll stick quickly to stuff that's sticky.
Yeah. Fake it till you make it. That makes sense.
It isn't to say we can't or shouldn't do those things. It's to say when we do those things, we're going to have consequences that are disturbing. And they're not happening to us. They're being caused by us. To see that responsibility is to start to say, wow, if I'm doing this, not only am I crazy, have been crazy, am crazy.
Everybody else is too that believes it.
Well, but I've really taken it so seriously as to imagine it's actually who I am. When all of a sudden, when you see it clearly, it's kind of like so ridiculous to ever think that you would take it for granted as being who you are and the sum total of your existence and the universe and everything else. And you realize how over dramatized and how grandiose we've been in that thought process.
I like this one guy that I met. I got to find him again. I haven't talked to him for a while, but he talked about how when he first got into the Boy Scouts, he was feeling terrible now for what he put his mom through, because like he made his mom sign off on everything, all these badges that he had won, so that he like the fastest Boy Scout to ever get all these badges, and they were giving him an award for like 30 badges in his first week. And then because he manipulated his mom, he was feeling bad. But I like that behavior, that alcoholic thinking. And then he would tell people, he goes, I got some good news and some bad news for you. The good news is you never have to drink again. The bad news is we're your new friends. And everybody would start laughing.
Okay, let's wrap this up and thank you guys. I want to continue. I don't know that we're going to do it next week, but
I want to continue, but I don't know if we're going to do it next week.
Well, we tend to continue throughout the week, and
let's just make a commitment to do it every week, and if it doesn't work, we don't do it.
Jack's traveling, I think so.
Those are his best sessions.
I believe I'm going to be set up to be able to do it, but I will see that, and leaving myself the option of not. But I do it enough during the week that it never quite ends, and I'm thinking about this a lot because I want to be better at thinking about it and expressing it and communicating it and all that. It doesn't mean that everybody's going to be happy hearing about this. And I don't always know how to do that. And I don't think that's my job. I don't feel like that's
I think because mission. You got to call it this thing about insanity. It's like a self-check on insanity. Like this is a way to make sure you're not insane.
Oh no, this is a way to guarantee you are.
Yeah, I like that even better.
Well, if we're thinking about it accurately, we're realizing this isn't humanity. The written human history has been emblematic of this kind of thinking.
Emblematic or problematic?
I think, I don't know.
Both. Emblematic means like it's a signal for it, right?
Yeah. So it's an emblem for it.
Yeah.
But
I think you're right. Sorry about that.
It's all right.
I can be problematic when I interrupt.
The idea that we are that we oppose, suppress, and depress people and kill them in the nature of what we think is right, which is always just a thought, is what war is based on. That's through human history. There's been almost 400 major wars, if I remember this right. Major wars, not just little incursions and that kind of thing. But all of them based on a thought of I'm right, they're wrong, the other guy's thinking we're right, they're wrong. Same thing, same thought, to Gabe's point earlier, same thought going in different directions, thinking that the one with the most force,
Well, what else could you argue
the
about?
most power.
What else is there possibly besides you're right and I'm wrong? Is there any other choice? Like, what else could you argue about?
Well, if we were not arguing about it, we could potentially be applying the thinking and seeing what actually pays off in a world that has provided all of the resources that we've utilized so far. Many of those we've overutilized and created extinction where it wouldn't have otherwise been caused. And we would be looking at how we're functioning as individuals and as a result collectively for the betterment of all and the greater good of all, rather than this idea that it's one country, one group, one something against another one. Imagine the money spent on war while we're claiming we don't have money to rebuild the infrastructure, we don't have money to deal with mental health problems, we don't have money to feed people. We've got all these deficiencies in society, but end up spending more than could possibly ever be spent on anything else other than the war machine that we create. We're the proprietors, the propagators of it, and also the victims to it. Exactly what happens to an addict.
I think this is one of the best meetings I've been to, by the way.
Yes.
Well, Anthony, you sat still when you were ready not to, when you were ready to bow out. You stayed put.
Well, plus
doing
I
the
got
same
everything
thing.
what I wanted. Going back to the other subject, it's easy to do that when you get everything you want. That I didn't even want. I got more than what I wanted.
Let me assure you, you've already got everything you can have, but there's no more you can possibly want. And starting to see this and come from that, like literally bring your thinking from that, is actually beginning to allow a lot of that stuff that you described, Gabe, as infinite is realized in math. All of the excess math falls apart because it's been complicating it the whole time.
Yeah.
If that's a refinement of the potential of math, why wouldn't it be the refinement of the potential of our own functional capacity in our lives with our relations and the people we claim to love, while we're not loving them to continue to maintain this stuff? We're actually hating them in some way or another.
The problem,
just like
though,
we hate the self we think we are.
The problem with that is you have to understand the highest level of math to get the relevance.
No, you just need to know Gabe and have him explain it. Now we understand it.
Yeah.
All right, I love you guys.
Thanks, you guys. Thanks for being so honest, Gabe.
Great stuff. Thanks.
And then erase this meeting again, Jack, so nobody else gets the knowledge.
All right,
guys.